watching the alibi with the more archers. No gas was spared, and the family held dear. No watching the alibi with the more archers.
Is the opportunity the reparations campaign offers us for the rehabilitation of African people, by African people, for African people. Opportunities for the rehabilitation of our minds.
Good morning.
Our material condition, our collective.
Good morning.
Our cultures, our memories. Our
Good
stories,
morning.
Our religious traditions.
Good morning.
traditions, and our family institutions.
Are you all hearing me well?
Rehabilitation of our minds. The most
Let's get this show underway, shall we?
the changing of the people, by African people,
Good morning.
opportunities for rehabilitation of
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. There you go. I believe we are live and direct via galaxyafiwe.net. So let's start the show, shall we? Let's get going. It's a beautiful day here in London town. It's a beautiful blue day. Slight whistle of clouds going through the sky. But I tell you, I was out this morning and the sun shone upon me. I felt so good. So this is the Motivator Show, usually alongside Lady Chelsea, but she's off studying at the moment. So I'm steering the ship by myself, although I'm on the hunt for another young lady with her own perspective to join us for a while whilst Lady Chelsea is away. So if you like the idea of speaking, advocating via this wonderful medium, contact me. My number is on the screen if you're viewing this via YouTube or Facebook or indeed Mixcloud. My number is on the screen and I'll give it out shortly. But if you're interested, please make contact with myself. Okay, so let's start the show. Let's begin first of all and recognize Ian King, who's taken us from night to day. Ian King, thank you always. And I appreciate your assistance earlier this week just to sort out a few technical issues. Thank you, Ian King. Long may you continue your outstanding works. I want to also give recognition to the Galaxy management, those visionary people, those visionary Africans, those determined people who really epitomize the theme and the purpose of why I'm here. Translate our words into action. Yeah. Translate our words into action. And remembering, success is ours for the taking. So I want to give praise to Chief Pakambabai, the visionary leader and founder of galaxyafiwe.net. I want to recognize Elder Eric Kute. My elder, I hope you're well. I have not spoken to you for a while, but I send good tidings from me, my family, and all those that know you. I give praise and recognize Dr. Abu Ratata, that determined African man, and his wonderful lady wife. I wish you both well always. And of course, I have to recognize the longest serving pilot on this station, Nickel, the most royal. I love that name. My brethren, hope you're well. I hope your family is well as also. May you continue your good works. And of course, I always want to give a special shout out and recognition to Empress Shanice, the solution finder. She doesn't moan. She doesn't gripe. What she finds are solutions to the issues. So we make constructive steps forward. Praise be, my interest. Praise be. Long may your works continue to impact upon the community. I give praise and recognize to you. And I listened to some of your show last week, and I have to say, so inspiring, always inspiring. I say to the men out there, listen to the women, listen to the women, listen to the women. I also want to give recognition, and I've missed this out for a few weeks for some reason, to a previous guest very recently, Ndidi Ishiwa, in one of her wonderful articles where she recognized that Africa's wealth is not in its natural resources, but in the technologies that derive from those resources. Okay, so I want to recognize the engineers and technicians who keep this station running for more than 35 years. I recognize and I applaud you. And long may the technicians continue to innovate and provide opportunities for this station and other stations like this to expand, not only in this country, in Britain, across Europe, Asia, the Americas, and of course, Africa as well. Let's the message go out. We recognize engineers and technicians. Yeah. We want to encourage our children to become engineers and technicians, become biologists, become scientists, geneticists. Yeah. We want to encourage them to study. There is a future there for you. Don't let the propaganda say otherwise to you. And if in doubt, speak to an elder, I say to those young people on the cusp of their careers. Speak to an elder if you are in doubt. So now I've given those initial introduction, and they are a prerequisite, okay? Because whenever you start something great, you recognize those who are responsible to form it. You recognize those who inspired it. I recognize you all, the Galaxy Management. But I also want to give recognition, of course, to the need for us to have these broader discussions, okay? And it's quite evident. Discussions about our health is critical. I say again, this discussion about our health is critical. And I will come on to our more recent guest, but I want to talk about our health. It is a public health emergency in the Black and African mixed race communities. Ready to talk about our health means that you suffer unduly from our health. And we must gain control over these health issues. So, without further ado, and clearly bearing in mind the positive responses I've received, and a few detracted, but that's to be expected. And if you've got any commentary about this health section, I'll also invite you to, you can call in. Okay, I'll give out the Skype number, just for those of you who've not remembered what our Skype number might be. And let's continue with the Skype number. I'm going to turn on the recording now. We're all clear. The Skype number to call if you've got any commentary about the health section. And I welcome your commentary. It is, if you're based here in England, it is, of course, 0208 133 5616. If you've got any commentary about this health section about to begin, I repeat, 0208 133 5616. So let's begin the health section. I invite you to make any comment on the health section, please. I welcome your input at this stage, but I will go straight into it. I ask you to consider the amount of sugar you are ingesting into your bodies. Why? Because we have an epidemic of diabetes in our communities. Here in Britain, Europe, like most certainly in the Caribbean and the Americas, and most certainly in parts of Mother Africa as well. We have an epidemic of diabetes, excessive amount of sugar we're ingesting into our bodies, and we can stop it. I say again, we can stop it. I ask you to consider Do you need to add sugar to your ingredients when making your teas and your coffees, your pastries or your cakes? Do you really need to add the excessive amount of sugars? Because it's killing us. Excessive amount of sugar is killing us or disabling us, making us more vulnerable to other health conditions. And of course, I remind you and I invite you to do the research in this particular speech given by Professor Hilary Beckles, the Vice Chancellor of the University of West Indies, where he noted the epidemic of diabetes in the Caribbean. So I ask you to consider it, because I have the feeling that most of you who are listening to this live show or recordings will know someone either in your immediate family, wider family, or your friends' network with diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is avoidable, essentially a lifestyle disease caused by excessive sugar, lack of exercise, insufficient amount of water, and other reasons as well. So we'll have a nutritionist on the show soon enough to talk about the various conditions. But those of you remember, I've had the 3 chefs on my show last year, where one of those chefs identified the fact that, in fact, he had got diabetes. And change is nutritional intake, is lifestyle. So he no longer ate those sugary and starch and carbohydrate-laden food, and he focused on those foods which are alive, more fruits and vegetables. Okay, plenty of exercise, plenty of water, and within a matter of months, he had resolved much of his diabetes concern. Okay, I should get him back here again to talk about that issue. It is so vital that that particular message, the excessive amount of sugar, is communicated to the community. I also ask you to consider the amount of salt you're ingesting. Okay, salt is one of those insidious ingredients we add to our food for no good reason, other than we've been taught as children it's there for flavoring, not dissimilar to sugar. Habit. We've got into a habit of adding salt to our food, when in fact, it is not needed. I repeat, it's not needed. You do not need to add additional salt to your foods. Although you have to be very careful, particularly those of us living in the West and in these processed foods, that salt is an integral part of the preservative placed in those processed foods. So I ask you to consider the amount of salt you're ingesting. And again, another epidemic of hypertension or high blood pressure in the community. No good reason other than our lifestyle. Okay, high blood pressure or hypertension. Again, I'm pretty confident the vast majority of you will know someone either in your immediate family, okay, wider family, or within your friends' network, someone with hypertension, high blood pressure, unnecessarily so, okay? Excessive amounts of salt harden your arteries, makes it difficult for the blood to flow through your veins, your arteries, and therefore you're operating at a much higher pressure. Please, those 2 ingredients alone over a sustained period of time, a long period of time, can only have harmful effects upon our bodies, our physiology. I ask you also to consider the amount of carbohydrates and starch that we're ingesting. I know it's a lot. I know this because it's found in all of our foods. You know, it's carbohydrates and starch. Okay, starch might primarily from rice. Yeah, eating rice every day, starch products. Yeah? Bread every day, starch products. You know, I just ask you to think about the quantum you're eating versus the amount of green vegetables and fruits and water that you're ingesting. Okay. Should they be more than the green vegetables and fruits that you're ingesting? These carbohydrates. Now, this is an important one. Those root vegetables, particularly the yam and potatoes, which are just jam-packed full of carbohydrates and starch. Yeah. Moderation. Again, moderation. I'm not saying you should stop it. I say to you, you could think about the quantum, the amount that you're ingesting. Because it won't happen to you today or tomorrow, next week or next month or next year. Maybe even the next decade. But it's probably you will contract one of those two conditions at some point in your life. And in both cases, they are quite, well, they're not conditions that there's a identifiable cure, but you can manage and reduce the impact on your body. Once your pancreas, once your livers, once those organs are affected and are damaged, it's difficult for them to recover. But if you change your lifestyle, you yourself, your body will recover. I also, of course, ask you to think about the amount of fat you ingest. Now, I've given you a comparison in the past of buying meat from the butchers. You've seen all these white streaks in the meat, yeah? Beef from the lamb, yeah? The pork, oh my gosh. And to a lesser extent, the chicken. And if you put it in over a grill, you see the fat just pour out of the meat. That's the fat that will accumulate in your body around your organs. Okay. And that fat is harmful. Yes, it does blow out your arms, blow out your waist, your hips, your thighs. I know I say it jokingly about some women, it kind of make them look unusually shapely, but in actual fact, I have to say to these women, you're carrying excessive amount of weight. And most women should not be heavier than most men with the same height. I say most, not all. Some women should be because of that their physiology. But the vast majority of women, I'll leave it to the expert to contribute to this part of the dialogue, should not be heavier than the men of the same height. Yeah. So I ask you to consider the amount of fat you're ingesting. Just consider it. I'm not saying you should stop it. I simply ask you to consider it and look to reducing the amount of fat you're ingesting into your bodies. Just think about the long-term impact that fat will have on your bodies. Please. I gain no personal financial gain. This is simply for you, raising awareness. I have another public hat in which I have a responsibility to communicate those messages that will help the community. Yeah? In other words, it's just common sense. I also ask you to think about not only the issues that I've raised so far, but how you are conducting yourself. How are you taking care of yourself? I ask you, please eat more fruits and vegetables. Please eat more fruits and vegetables, live food, in other words. Yeah. Eat more. Meat should be no more than 5 or 10% of your total diet, if that. Eat more fruits and vegetables. Remember to drink the appropriate amount of water. Again, go to your nutritionist, go to your GP, let them tell you an appropriate amount for your height and body mass. Yeah? Let them tell you what is the right amount of water. I'm told between 2 to 3 liters per day. Yes, I have my water here. Oh yeah, it's right here. And I will sip it as I go along today. And most certainly, I make sure, oh, if I can find it, I have my weights. I do these weights for a good 30 minutes or so. And then do a good run each morning, race my heart, sweat a little bit, okay? I can feel my body say, yes, you are right. This is what we need. Because 100 years ago, I would have had to go hunt for my food. And that's what our bodies know. We are genetically created for that purpose. But our sedentary lifestyle, our excessive amount of fruits, salt and sugars are incredibly harmful to our bodies. So I say to you all, I'm not telling you what to do. I simply ask you to consider what is in your best interest. And lastly, very quickly, if I may, I ask you to consider your mental and your spiritual health. These are vital parts of who you are. And if you're in doubt, please seek professional advice. If you're concerned about your mental health, please seek professional advice. If you are concerned about your spiritual well-being, please seek out those who are wise in these matters to give you advice so that you may engage in constructive, holistic practices that enables you to last and grow yet for another day. Meditation I've found to be absolutely wonderful. Yeah? Meditation is vital if we're to continue to be in good physical, mental, and spiritual health. And lastly, as a previous guest has alluded to on a previous occasion on this program, we must take care of our sexual health. I want to emphasize this. Here in our community, particularly here in Britain, we have above average levels of STIs, sexually transmitted infections. There's no good reason for this other than us not discussing it and taking actions. If you're a bit coy, a bit shy, discuss your sexual health with those in your families, go to your GP, please. If in doubt, seek advice. Or if you're in Britain and you listen to this recording, or you listen to us live, just do a search for your nearest sexual health clinic. Just get a sexual health MOT. Just make sure you're clear of any STIs. Unbeknown to you, you may have been carrying STI for years and not realized it. This is the mature thing to do, mature action to carry out. If you're meeting someone for the very first time, go together to a sexual health clinic. Just make sure you have no STIs. For reasons which are not forgivable, really, we continue to have abnormally high levels of STIs, sexually transmitted infections in our community for no good reasons. I urge you all to take that particular message seriously, because all we do is continue to infect others that we come in contact with. And in some areas here in Britain, there's an interesting service where you can obtain sexual health advice and diagnosis in a remote format. Okay, we've got in this country the sh24.gov.uk. Okay, so I wish to encourage you, if you're unsure, just put in your search engine in Britain, put in sh24, and I'm told you're able to go to the website and you'll be asked to enter your postcode, and if the service covers your postcode, in other words, if your local trust or CCG or clinical commissioning group are brought into the service, you're able to obtain the remote services. I commend SH24 to you if you're in this country and it's available in your area. So you do not need to go to the sexual health clinic in person unless they call you in for a specific reason. But I hope these messages resonate with some of you, both the nutritional health messages, general exercise, which is so important. You must exercise every day. And those common sense steps, if you've got any doubt about your mental or indeed your spiritual health. It is really crucial that we take care of ourselves, because if you do not take care of yourself, how can others take care of you? So that's me on the health messages, but they are vitally important. Those of you which make any comment on the health section, I welcome your feedback. I've spoken to a number of people this week who have responded quite positively to these health messages. They are absolutely crucial if we are to improve the general health and well-being within the community. We have a responsibility to ourselves. Reparations begins with self, our deliberate action to enhance ourselves. It is within our power. We can't blame anyone else. It's us. The onus is upon us. It is our responsibility. All righty, that's good. Thank you. Thank you for those positive feedbacks I've received. Thank you for your feedback. I want to move on now. I want to first of all just recognize what a wonderful show we had last week. I think you all would agree that last week's show was really interesting. Okay, so Ndidi Ishiwa, okay, journalist extraordinaire, provided really useful insights into the internal dynamics in Nigeria, Africa's most populous country, the country with the greatest potential to create wealth for its people, but is currently underperforming. It is currently underperforming. I still refer to Nigeria as Great Nigeria because despite the diversity of peoples that make up that great country, the potential of those people, they were able to overcome the differences, both religious and ethnic differences. The potential is way beyond the stratosphere. The vision for that country is simply enormous, but it takes visionary leadership to overcome those ethnic and religious differences. And what Ndidi was able to display last week is really give light to some of those differences and the challenges that Nigeria is currently undergoing. I wish to thank her for her strident, determined contribution to last week's show. And I want to thank those who called in and responded. But we must keep discussing Nigeria, okay? Great Nigeria. I'm going to say it again, great Nigeria. And if all Nigerians saw the country as being great, the attitude to the issues in Nigeria would be transformed. And you'll be in the Empress Shanice mode, solutions mode. You'll be in the solutions mode, in the Empress Shanice mode. She's in Africa right now. I say to Nigerians, contact her, you know, solutions finder. Oh yeah, sorry, Empress, I hope you don't mind that. But anyway, you know, it is important. Nigeria is important to us all. I know many of those in different parts of the motherland of Africa or the Caribbean do not believe so. We in America don't believe so, but actually Nigeria is a crucial country for the general well-being of African peoples worldwide. Similarly, of course, I want to give praise to Her Royal Highness, of course. It's so important that we recognize our aristocracy. Mm-hmm. And it's really an interesting one because, you know, I, at some point in the past, had considered whether or not there was any reason to recognize our aristocracy, okay? But I want to give recognition to the aristocracy. Why? Why would I want to do this? Well, you know, there we go. Let me explain why. Queen Namcissy I, what she was able to demonstrate is that amongst the aristocracy across the continent, there's real vision. She was able to give light to us with a desire for those countries from which my ancestors were taken from, are calling the children, diasporians, back home again, that we may continue and will continue to make positive contribution to the economic revival of Africa. That despite the fact that many of the diasporans can only speak one language, that the country of Ghana are making deliberate steps to make it easier for diasporans to return to Africa, return, in this case, to Ghana. And I will have her back here in the studio to discuss how you're able to get back to Ghana, get back to Africa. And of course, really to look at some historical aspects of that great country also. So that the information disconnects, that gap that's in our minds, many of us from the diaspora, can be filled, And there are many members of the aristocracy right across the continent who share her visionary views. It was the second time she'd appeared on this show, and she would appear later on this year. I've made that promise to her. You make a promise to Her Royal Highness, you should keep it. But I want to applaud her for her contribution to our debate. It most certainly proved to be extremely insightful and encouraging to many who are able to appreciate her words, her wise words. And Her Royal Highness, if you're listening at the moment, thank you for your contribution. Thank you. I also want to recognize a wonderful, inspired sister, someone who I've come to know very well, and someone who's not an ordinary sister, but someone's also running for elected office, soon to become, I hope, a councillor, and that is, of course, Natasha Ennin. She is an expert from our Citizens Advice Bureau, and she responded to the call from many in the community concerned that the hyperinflationary energy prices and their consequential impact on all prices would have an adverse impact upon our community. And she was able to articulate, to explain, to focus our attention where there is support. And she pointed out that if you go to your local Citizens Advice Bureau, those operatives in those offices are trained to give you advice, how to cope and survive these soaring energy bills and general costs of living. So I want to applaud Natasha Ennin for her contribution. I want to applaud her for the knowledge she possesses. I know I've spoken to her during the week. She will come back again, and we have a broader discussion on how to support the community through these trying times. So please, please watch this space. Please, whenever you see Natasha Ennin, applaud her, shake her hand, hug her where you can, give her recognition that we appreciate the advice and guidance that she was able to offer. A wonderful, outstanding sister. Thank you so much, Natasha. Long may you and your family stay well. All righty. Now then, let's now move on to the theme for today's show. And today's show will be quite interesting because in today's show, we will have the opportunity to look at a subject which continuously occurs both in this of my show and all shows in this station, and possibly one of the reactions to why the station existed. You recall we've had Chipa Kombabai, the founder and leader of Galaxy Afiwi, on this show as well, where he discussed the founding of GalaxyAfiwi.net. And that is, of course, the issue of ethnic bias. Some may call it some Afrophobia, and some may call it simply racism in Britain and indeed beyond. I've, of course, alluded to it on many occasions. I always start with the monarch because the monarch sets the tone. Mhm. And if the monarch isn't discussing the subject, if the monarch isn't expressing concern, if the monarch doesn't infer that all citizens are equal under the law, then of course you have the situation we have today. So the monarch fails in the leadership. We, from our community, have got to look for allies in the wider community, okay? I can see that someone is calling me at the moment from 9065. I, of course, can't take your number. I can't take a call right now. If you're calling in response to the health section, feel free to call, but I can't take calls whilst I'm live online. Please use the studio number, which is 0208 133 5616. So let me continue. So the issues of racism, the issues of ethnic bias, the issue of Afrophobia, okay, affects British society. In fact, affect all societies who are members of the so-called Commonwealth. It is a continuous, perennial problem. And I have to say to all of you, its pernicious impacts are economic impacts. If you have one ethnic group who is serving the needs of another, but serves them poorly, deliberately poorly, conscious, some cases maybe unconscious, you affect this country, Britain, economically, because you're undermining the economic benefits of those peoples can offer the country. I know some people believe, well, no, it doesn't. Oh, yes, it does. As in my early days in public life, when speaking to teachers, they could not, some of them could not get a connection between performing poorly in school and economic viability of the students that arrive out of their teaching into wider society. So I do wonder, when I speak to some people, how they believe they're benefiting Britain when carrying out these ethnic bias, Afrophobic, ethnic bias behaviors. Okay. But you know what? You can't wait for such people. They have to come to this realization for themselves. But what I am clear, that today's program will look strategically at this broad subject, okay? And look at it from the point of view, well, if you were to affect change, you need as many allies as possible because you are coming together in common purpose, a common aim, common objectives. And therefore it's mutually beneficial that the disabilities that is caused by ethnic bias behavior, racist behavior, if you like, Afrophobic behavior, are challenged straight right on. And if you see it, what do? Do you just walk on by, or do you challenge it, or you call it into question? That's an important point. I know that many white people I encounter have seen racist action, observed it, ethnically biased actions, Afrophobic behavior. They've seen it and have simply walked on by. They have simply walked on by. On the assumption that it's not affecting me, therefore I'm not going to get involved. without realizing the wider implications of members of your own community and the wider impact it has on the whole community. So I ask you, please, to consider a video. Okay. I've been to meetings where we discuss these subjects, and we're asked as Black people, African peoples, to pour out our heart. I know for others, it is difficult to hear and to respond to. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to play an interesting video. The young lady is going to talk about this experience, okay? In the hope it will help, and I'm going to use the terminology now, help our white allies. I know it's a very broad term because Russians are white, okay? Ukrainians are white, okay? English people are white generally. Scottish people are white generally. Welsh people are white generally, and of course, Irish people are white generally. It's a very broad term, I know. I know it's like saying black, and assuming that all Black people are of the same ethnicity. Clearly, very simplistic, I know. It's very simplistic terminology, I recognize. But just for ease of communication today, I'm going to go along with the terminology white. Just for ease of communication today. So the theme for today's program is white allies. And before I bring in my guest, what I want to do, I want to play a short video, okay? And as an intro to my inspired guest, okay? This will be really quite interesting. So let's see if I can get the technology to work first time. Would that be nice? But life is not always so straightforward. So give me a moment. Let's see if we can get it to work. There we go. Let's see if we can get it in. And now I'm going to go along and let's play it.
White people tend to want to connect with Black and brown stories by first connecting personally. And I think that's important. That shows there's a potential to find a human connection. There's a metaphor of the mirror where you see yourself in the person and it helps you to connect. And so I think you personalize somebody else's story. And that oftentimes happens through this process. I think it's good. It's a good process, but it can't be the only process. If you don't also, you access your heart, but if you don't also access your mind, you will leave with a bunch of stories in a proverbial basket, a lot of emotions, and you don't know what to do with it. So the first thing I wanted to share, and it was so clear to me in that moment, to teach people that when you hear first of all, the fact that we have to keep saying these stories over and over again are traumatic and it is exhausting. I had to let the space know I am tired. All right. Not everybody is built the same. Some people can just share their stories and they're an open book and I'm not that person. I get exhausted sharing and hearing stories. All right. So I needed to make that clear. This is helping you guys, but you have to understand the emotional, what's the word I'm looking for? Expenditure. It's not the word I really want, but it's exhausting. We lose bits of ourselves every time we continually have to relive these stories to help you. So when you hear us share, you might hear us speak with animation, with anger, with passion, with emotion, and it could be a turnoff. It could make you uncomfortable because you don't know how to receive all of that. So I just needed to make that clear, though, that don't shy away from the discomfort. Just know where it's coming from. We're probably tired. It's probably the 10th time we've had to justify to people or prove to people that Black and brown people face racism. The fact that we even have to have a constant justification, or not justification, a constant proof. We have to constantly prove that racism still exists. It's exhausting, and we have to share our personal tragedy, relive our tragedy to share with you so you can get the hint. because all these years you've lived behind a veil. It's exhausting. And I say that to tell people that when you hear stories, then it's good to connect with me, but I also need you to put your mind on and understand, why am I listening to this story? Be very intentional about the stories you're receiving, because all of this is to help you be an advocate for us or an ally for us. If you can hear my story or our stories enough that you can re-articulate it in spaces that I do not have access to, or when we're in meetings, the Black and brown people aren't the only ones speaking. You also have context to speak to it too. Then that helps the cause. So when you're listening, it's okay to cry. White tears occupy a lot of space in these areas. So, I'll do a whole nother episode. I've said this before. I keep promising that I'll talk about white tears in another episode. But it's I say that to say it's okay to be emotional, but that's not why, the only reason why you're there. Please listen with intent. Do you know our stories enough that you can speak within context? And will it help shape the way that you create relationships? And in education, all of this is because of education within this industry. Will it shape your curriculum? I didn't take this long to explain that this morning, but I guess I'm just getting fired up again now. But that was important for me to say in the moment. So I was kind of glad that Rudy was like, you should say something. Because I felt like that's because sometimes I feel like white people come to these spaces, they don't know what to do with it. Like, well, here's what you can do. Listen, but listen with purpose. You have a plan now. So listen with the intent to take actions, or to have these stories inform your decision making and in education, the way you treat your job.
Wow, wasn't that powerful? Wasn't that powerful?
Your reputation's amazing.
Oh, let me
I will
stop
not
this
let
thing
you
if I
down.
can. There
You
we
will
go.
be
Sorry.
very.
Oh, here we go. Thank you. Well, that was powerful, truly powerful. And I want to thank that particular speaker. It's from a YouTube channel called Black Woman Be Well. Okay. I want to thank that woman. She was truly inspired. And as you will know, those who listen regularly to this program, this year, I'm trying to focus as far as possible on the contributions made to our community, our society, by women. Okay, so you've noticed virtually all of my guests have been women, and that's very, very, very deliberate. I want to recognize the contributions made by women, whom are inspired women. And indeed, by magic, we have another inspired woman here. Josephine, oh, you're with us. I'm so pleased. First of all, to thank you for accepting my invitation. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. We can hear you very well.
Fantastic, thank you.
Josephine, the founder, inspiration between the whiteallies.org. Okay. And I've got to say, before I'll get to you, I was able to say this to you. But I've said this to most of the women, it seems, I've had this year. I've had the greatest spiritual, intellectual experience in doing the research and preparing for each of these shows. Okay. Each time when I do research and I study and I understand the impact women have had on our community and our growth and in creation of new vision for our community, I'm always overwhelmed, almost to the point of being emotionally overwhelmed. Okay. And you are yet another example of the very best of us, but it's just you're an ordinary person. Josephine, please introduce yourself to my audience. Who are you? And why form the whiteallies.org? Please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for inviting me into this space. I'm not used to kind of that enthusiasm and acknowledgement, but I appreciate it. So my name is Josephine Namcissy Riley, and I am originally from Uganda, and I currently work for an organization called Citizens UK. And Citizens UK is a community organizing charity that empowers and builds the capacity of people to make change. My role there is to run a maternal mental health project for families with young children, and to support parents with reducing isolation and improving their mental health. I also sit on the board of trustees for the Maudsley charity, which is also supports mental health initiatives, research, innovation to improve mental health. But I started White Allies after the murder of George Floyd. Like millions of people worldwide, it literally just slapped me in the face. You know, we experienced racism and all sorts of trauma, but this, for some reason, just had that, it cut deeper. And so I'm a woman of faith, and I was thinking, well, what am I going to do? I also didn't feel comfortable joining or being part of Black Lives Matters, because I don't feel that sense of entitlement to demand change. So instead I thought, oh, well, I'll do what I do. I went into a period of reflection and prayer, fasting, just to try and find a different way that I could contribute, that I could do something to tackle this problem. So I did that for a couple of months at least. And one day after, I think lockdown was easing back then, and we were allowed to go for a walk with another person from two different households. And I went for a walk with a friend who shared a story about her son. And her son, we live in Lambeth, he was going to Brixton Rec for basketball practice, and he was late, and he had a big hoodie on, and he was running, jogging, you know, about 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning. And all of a sudden, a police car stops and two officers approach him. Because he was wearing this oversized hoodie over his head, you couldn't see his body, basically. He took down his hood, and the officers said, "Oh, are you okay? Are you in any trouble? Is anyone chasing you?" And literally, this boy went home and said to his mom, "Today I understood my white privilege." Because 90% of my mates at football, at basketball, are not white, majority Black, and their experiences daily are very, very different from my experience of encountering the police. So that was the inspiration. And you know, when you feel like something has landed, but you don't know what you're going to do with it. But that's where I thought, how about we hear white people share stories? Like, I think it is the step after what the speaker that you, the video that you played, that is the next step, is that you listen to the stories and maybe you think, oh, really? Did that really happen? Well, how about you reflect in your life, in your experience, and think, this is where I truly recognized that racism was taking place, or that the world around me treats me in a different way because of the color of my skin.
I'll ask you this point then, and thank you. That's really interesting segue into my next question. And I was initially going to question you on you're feeling that you didn't feel entitled to demand change in the country in which you reside. But then you then go on to say, but you've now been inspired to form an organization which of course seeks to effect change in the country in which you reside. You absolutely have a right. And indeed, children and our children's children have a right to demand change. Because you've empowered yourself for your inspiration, fasting and prayer. Interesting. Another time, another place we must talk about fasting and prayer, and its ability to inspire, to encourage, to strengthen the spirit and the mind. You know,
Yeah.
Very important observation. And I'm going to have a series of religious leaders in future shows discussing fasting and prayer and its purpose. Okay, but nevertheless, let me come back to where we are. You're of course right, because you have no idea, as I said to you on the phone, the impact you've had on tens of thousands of people without realizing it, because you've highlighted the blindingly obvious. If we are to effect change in this country, we cannot do it by ourselves.
Exactly.
We must have allies.
Yeah.
Okay. You've used the euphemism white allies. You know, I said earlier on, Russians are white. But what we're really referring to are to British people, regardless of your ethnicity. We must become allies for a common good, a common purpose, a common objective.
Yes.
I know what you mean. So I'm going to ask you, if I may, my first question to you. And I realize you write here from Uganda in relatively recent times, but of course, my memory of this country goes back to the 60s.
Yeah.
And my parents, of course, to the 50s.
Yeah.
Okay. I say that deliberately because, of course, we have the 1965 to 2000 Race Relations Act, and also the 2010 Equalities Act. Do you not think that they're good enough? Why not just simply create an organization to enforce those acts? Why
That's a really good question. And I think the law and those acts are brilliant. They are necessary. We need that protection. But that protection, in my mind, should be the last step. It's not the first step, because beneath the Race Relations Act and legislation, you have diversity and inclusion work and policies and procedures in place for organizations and places of work and spaces to further protect and promote the rights of Black and Brown people. But you know, White Allies is about challenging white people to take individual responsibility. If you think about racism, what color of people is most likely to have the behavior that would have the most damaging impact to us? It is white people. I'm not saying that there's no racism between other races, but the majority of our problems and of that behavior is a result of white people's behavior. And if we can center white people because they're the most likely to have this behavior, and we lift the burden off of Black people, the video that lady said, you know, the burden of sharing our stories and either being ignored or being not believed, it is exhausting. It is damaging to us. And centering white people is what I am asking people to do. It's not just ticking boxes. It's not just adhering to the law. It is not just in line with diversity and inclusion policies. It is reflection, it's personal examination, and a personal commitment to do the work so that if we can get white allies to collaborate our stories and to take action, I believe that is where the most change is going to come from. Where that fails, and we need to be protected, of course, we are going to rely on the law. But I don't think it is the first step. I think the reason that we've failed is that that's what we've relied on. We've said, oh, well, I haven't broken the law. I haven't, but actually in this country, the majority of behavior that impacts on us negatively is very subtle. It's not, it's not out there. People say, oh, well, it's not like it is in America. We know that government report about our experiences denying the experience of a whole lot of people to say there's no racism. So, and it's the government that makes the laws, and then they come out and say, oh no, there's no problem here. So that's why I'm calling on individuals to do the work. And once they make that personal commitment, it's like sowing a seed, and then you nurture it. And actually, as it grows in you, your behavior starts to reflect that in the spaces that you occupy, in the networks that you are part of, that you are going to be a better ally. You are going to speak up. You are going to challenge other white people. It's so much easier than it is for us. Every time you sit in a meeting and you have to raise that subject, I often feel like my nails are digging in my chair somewhere, just
I hear you.
summoning the courage to, because I know people will roll their eyes and say, oh God, here we go again. It's so much harder for us.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for that. That's very insightful. And of course, going back to your earlier example with the police, and that young man, white young man, and how they reacted to him wearing a hoodie. Of course, I have a son. See, I have children, girls and boys, and I've been through a similar experience myself when I was a youngster, and the differential behavior is most striking. So you may not have heard I said I started with the monarch. The monarch is not talking about the impact of racism, ethnic bias, Afrophobia, if you like, and its impact on society and the British economy. And of course, that's why this situation has continued for generations. Because the leader, the principal, because we're all subjects of the monarch. Ultimately, the monarch has to sign off on all of these laws, these legislation, for them to become true acts of parliament. They require royal assent. So if the monarch isn't discussing it or giving light to it and expressing concern, why should your average English, Scotch, Irish, or Welsh person respond? You are? Okay. So I hear you, but equally so. It is very challenging to tackle the subject, but I'm in many ways, I'm quite blessed that I live in the borough of Southwark. I believe that Southwark has real examples of positive steps to achieve genuine equalities for all. The motto of the council is a fairer future for all. Okay, I say that not by way of a political slogan, but by way of a statement of intent. Okay. My next question to you, and forgive me if this puts you on the spot, is a bit embarrassing, but it doesn't matter. That's why you're here. Do you have white friends?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I have more white friends than black friends. Okay. So, because for me, connecting with people, and I know that within our communities, we tend to keep ourselves to ourselves and think, that is safest. But as an immigrant, as a first generation immigrant, I didn't have a community to build on. And therefore the spaces where I go, my church, work, those are the spaces where I've had the opportunity to make friends. And I don't choose my friends because, I could say, oh, I'll only have Ugandan friends, or I'll only have Black friends. No, I connect with people for whatever purpose, because of a shared interest, because of our humanity. And also I think that is very important in my White Allies work, because I wanted to take a different approach, because I think in the space of this work, there's so much anger, there's so much blame, there's so much frustration. And I wanted to take a really gentle approach where I'm appealing to white people, to do this work. I'm not, because it's very easy to point the finger to say, well, why don't you know? Why don't you understand? So I'm taking it in the gentlest way that I was inspired to do, for them to reflect. And I know that there's so many good causes. There's so many inequalities. There's so many things that people could be passionate about. And they might reflect and think, well, I recognize that that is wrong, but I'm going to put my energy into homelessness. I'm going to put my energy into saving the planet. But where people feel called to do something different, to tackle racism, that they do it from that space, rather than the diversity and inclusion policy says this or the law says that. That is the only way that we are going to get that change, So I hope that answers your question.
It does indeed, and by virtue of the fact that white people are the overwhelming majority people here, your work requires you interact with the community, and inevitably, we're all in the same position. Thank you, Josephine. I know there's some of my African or Black friends who will say, "No, I don't have white friends," and I said, "Well, that's great, okay, but I equally have many white friends, and these are honorable people, and have overcome the indoctrination that they've suffered through their early childhood at school." The propaganda taught at school is pretty profound, and clearly disparages people of African heritage in ways that so dehumanizes us. It's inevitable that they have feelings of hesitation or concern when amongst large groups of African or Black people, because that's what they've been taught through the propaganda at school and in many of the newspapers and press that we have in this country. Even to today, we have those underlying subtle messages communicated primarily to white people about other people that they might encounter here in Britain. And in many ways, the police manifest the indoctrination that English, Scotch, Welsh, and Irish people are taught about other peoples that look differently to them. Okay, so yes, I hear you, and I recognize you.
You know what, as well, if I may, this country is full of immigrants.
It is,
including white immigrants.
Yes.
So I think that it is important to recognize that, and because they might think, oh, well, you're talking to British people or people in the United Kingdom. No, if you live here, wherever you live, you can make a difference. You can be an ally to Black and brown people. So, I don't want to excuse other white immigrants from different countries, because they still have that privilege and advantage in that way.
Beautifully articulated, beautifully. Now let's go to the verb. Let's focus on the actions, okay?
Yeah.
So you have a wonderful website, okay, which I must say I found very useful, whiteallies.org. You might see it, there you are. So those of you who wanting to contact Josephine, you can contact her via the website whiteallies.org. And there's an interesting page, and those of you who go there, you'll see, I'm going to go to the action page. Okay. Because even though you know, you had my name as Martin Seaton, yes, I'm an elected councillor, but here I'm known as the motivator, where we translate our words into action. Okay. Right. And of course, I reiterate, success is ours for the taking. Yeah, it's a mindset. You know? Yeah. So let's go to the verb. Let's go to that website of yours and the action page, which I so loved, goes in line with my thinking. So the first header on your action page is do the work. Now, let's explain what you mean, do the work. What does that mean in action terms?
It refers to that idea that I explained about reflection and examination. And I think asking white people to share a story is one way, that is one route into that space of reflection and self-examination. Because if you can think of an experience where you witnessed this injustice taking place, or whether to your benefit or to the disadvantage or trauma of someone else, then that is a good place to start. And then you can think, well, is there something I could have done differently? You know, what was going on? What about the spaces that I'm in now? Where is the risk of this taking place? So that's what I mean. The work is not out there. It's not writing a piece of paper. It's not going places. That work happens within. That's what I'm asking people to do, is to go in and do the work. And that is harder than you might expect.
Again, I recognize this, and those of my particularly English or Scottish people who have confided in me, and I don't need to say names or anything like this at this point, they fear doing the work because of repercussions from their own people, their own community. But of course, the propaganda that in some way that British people, English people, Scottish people, Welsh people, Irish people slightly more have a superiority stance, okay, and any concession will mean that they lose their superior position. It's very challenging for many I've encountered. They are more concerned about members of their own community than us.
Yeah.
They were concerned about the repercussions. And this is a lesson it's taken me some decades to fully appreciate. When you have a generational feeling of, well, you know, artificial superiority, you can't turn it overnight. It can't be turned off overnight. It is a process. Yeah, it is a process. And it was most striking when an Englishman pointed out to me that members of the family were held very strident racist views. But when he asked, well, where do these views come from? No, they'd read them somewhere, either in some book or a newspaper, or have heard it in conversation in a pub or wine bar or other places, or where they're just white people discussing the change in society caused by those who have a different skin color.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, it is pretty profound. So for white people to change direction and see the big picture and to understand the economic damage they do to their own countries by such behavior, it's pretty deep, pretty profound for them.
Very much so.
Yeah, very much so. I'm not that I fully appreciate this. I'm careful how I tackle this subject in practical terms, but maybe depending on how much time we have, I might allude, and we might have that dialogue, compare notes, action notes. So I see on this interesting page of yours, the next item is some spreading the word. Just explain that to us and how that should happen. Spread the word. What do you mean by that when you said spread the word?
So it is asking people to, in their networks, ask other people to go on the website and read the stories and maybe even leave a story, because that is the way that they might get to decide for themselves what they do about it. So spread the word. Now you are talking to me about this action page. I'm thinking, gosh, I should make it a lot more specific. But that is basically what I mean, is I'm saying to people, there's this interesting website. I want you to have a look and read a few stories and see what you think. That is it, because then that is going to help other people. If they read a story and they go, oh, the stories are separated into education, policing, different, so that people can navigate much more easily things that they might be able to relate to, or where they might struggle to understand how those issues play out in those areas of work or life. And so that is what that is about, is inviting other people, whether they are, regardless of where they are on their journey, to go there too.
Spread the word.
Yes.
Spread the word within their families, their friends group, their networks. Spread the word. These are the actions we should take. But of course, the third item on that page is educate yourself. And I'm interested, you contextualize what you meant by educate yourself.
So once you have determined for yourself what really is going on and what your position has been. So if you are, for example, afraid of, tackling that subject in your family, like the example of people that you know, and you think, well, what can I do? There's so many resources out there now that you just need to search something and you will find materials and education and films and videos like the one you played that will help you understand or articulate or, determine what you need to do. That is because everybody will be different. Some people will be like how you described, they have been socialized, and we've all been to a certain extent socialized to think that we are not equal. And then you have to think, well, why are we not equal? And go there and think, oh, but where was the first man? Maybe you just need to know that the first man
came from Africa. Yeah.
Thank you. And therefore, that whole thing might be turned on its head, in your head. So everybody will be, some people will already know that, but they will think, oh, we've evolved into better people. Excuse me, the first civilization was also, So that is what I mean. But some people will have that information, but they will also ignore it and do something different. So that's why education is depending on what your beliefs, on where you need to challenge yourself, to educate yourself and understand better and make a different decision maybe.
Indeed. And again, using your website as an interesting resource. And indeed, Josephine, you're another example of the inspired African. On the aims, you say this: become true allies of people of color, the global majority, in the fight against systematic global injustice.
Yes.
Learn about ourselves, becoming more aware of our white histories, our white privilege, our white worldview, our white behavior and impact these have had and continue to have on those with black, brown, and yellow skin. Learn about people of color, the global majority, and more fully honor their historic and continuing contribution to world history, filling in the gaps in our own whitewashed history. And lastly, you say the bullet point: develop ideas for action that we can take individually, collectively, and in partnership with others to counteract racism in our immediate context and in wider society. Oh my dear Josephine. I'm going to put you up there with Gandhi, Martin Luther King, those great Africans. Huh? That's where I'm going to put you. Those are inspired words, if I may say so. Because on your action page, you then go on to discuss White Allies podcast. Just explain why using that, what's so important of a podcast?
I think really the podcast, when I never really set out to start a podcast, but when I got the idea and I discussed it with a few of my volunteers, we felt that, in this day and age, there's so many different ways that people access information. So we started the podcast, and the first episode was about me and why I'm doing this work, so that people can understand a little bit more if they're curious, saying, who is this woman and who does she think she is and why is she doing this? But not only that, the plan is to talk to people who are white, who are courageous, and who step up to talk about this subject and to discuss the approach that we're taking, the White Allies approach that we're taking, and share their views and their opinions and share stories as well through the podcast. So people might not necessarily have time to go and sit down and read the stories on the website. So the podcast is just another way for people to get a better understanding of the work that we're trying to do.
Wonderful, wonderful. If I may ask you, your next action point, of course, is to encourage white people to start a White Allies group in their neighborhood, in their vicinity. How's that been responded to generally? Because I know I've spoken to a number of white people who are connected with your own group. But tell me, generally, how do you find that white people have responded to your call to communicate these positive messages about society and people that make up society? How have they responded?
I generally get a really good response to the work, but I don't know whether the level of impact I've had around getting people to start a White Allies group, because I named it that, but really what I mean is start those conversations in your networks. But I did, and that speaks to the next item on the action list. I did, I was contacted by the White Allies Network after my blog for the Royal Society of Arts, when last year, actually it might have been the year before, nearer the end of 2020, when I wrote my first blog, again appealing to white people in this way. It was the first thing I put out. And Adrian Locke, who I think you might be familiar with, contacted me to say, thank you for challenging us. And I wanted to let you know that we're doing this work. So I don't think that it was necessarily, my call, but I think that people are having conversations. And that's why I'm calling upon people. If there are no networks, if they don't feel like they can do that, they can join the White Allies Network and use that space to educate themselves and join other people who want to become better allies. So I don't really know. In a way, it's a bit like, you raise a child and you hope they're gonna go out and do good in the world, but you never quite know. And so I take a sort of parent's view of this and hope that people that come into contact with my work in this area will be inspired, and they will go on to have these conversations and to make change and to become better allies.
Thank you, and that's really quite helpful. And I've seen quite a few interesting podcasts by white people addressing these issues. Okay, and they seem to follow interesting themes. And again, on your website, you have a section about the taking action, but an interesting one. I'm going to read a few bullet points from your own website. And you say here, the first step is to make personal commitment by setting aside time for this exercise. Our invitation is for you to really connect and acknowledge the unfairness of racism and the advantages of inherent privilege. And you now going to suggest a few steps that might help with this. The first bullet point you write here, examine your consciousness and how you really feel about racism. And you then go on to say, are you angry, ashamed, embarrassed, confused, tired, etc.? Can you understand why you feel like this? Okay, this is the first stage I've found for most people, but most certainly for white people in this context. Examine your consciousness. Then your second bullet point is reflect on situations where you've witnessed racism against Black, brown people and or have benefited from your privilege. You've seen the racism against Black or brown people, but of course you said nothing because you continue to benefit because of your white privilege. Wow, profound. And your next bullet point, can you imagine how it might feel to be a victim of racism? Now that's a bit of self-actualization. And I know a woman I've spoken to on the subject, she went through an emotional turmoil when it became fully conscious, how our behavior had affected. And of course, you then go on to say, and there are interesting stories on the website, read through some of the stories shared by other peoples who are members of the White Allied Network. Wow. Pretty profound, Josephine. Pretty profound. Pretty profound, okay. And of course, if we're to tackle these matters, it will be multifaceted.
Yeah.
Multifaceted. So this is one string to our collective bow that we must employ towards anti-racism, anti-ethnic bias, for us to overcome the vestiges of the old imperial mentality, which had some good for some British people, but is no longer fit for purpose for Britain in the 21st or indeed 22nd, 23rd centuries. Okay. Britain is truly a collection of people working together can achieve far greater together than working individual. So the collectivism creates an environment in which you are in an environment which is better, a quantum leap than being a single ethnic group.
Absolutely.
Powerful stuff. And I had note, but I'm a man, huh? It wasn't us men that created this network. They created and actualized these ideas. Again, it was our women of the community, the inspired women in our community. And if I may say again to you, Josephine, you've had profound impact for me and many thousands of people who have examined ways in which we tackle this issue of racism here in Britain, the country that we choose to be and choose to have our children.
Thank you very much.
Our pleasure. I'm going to open up the phone lines, but I know that there are quite a number of people listening, and I'm interested. I'm going to encourage, because normally I forget that time is running out.
Yes.
But this time we want to interact.
Yeah.
So I'm opening up the phone line now. So the phone number to call, it's 0208 133 5616. I repeat, 0208 133 5616. Okay, the phone lines are now open. Okay, and I will also say that if you're viewing the program via YouTube, Facebook, or Mixcloud, you see the number on the screen. And if you're viewing via any of those platforms, both certainly on YouTube and Facebook, please give us a like, just so I know acknowledgement we're doing the right thing here. Or better still, subscribe. There's no cost to subscribe. You'll simply be notified of the subject of the forthcoming program. But we want to encourage you to give us a like, so we have some feedback, or indeed you can give us a written response to what you're hearing today. I can't interact with you directly, but I will take note of your comments as we continue. So come back to yourself now, Josephine, and let's just talk about the wider allies. Okay. You mentioned at least one person who I've had the privilege to speak to, Adrian, and it was quite interesting. It was particularly interesting because he, of course, is a member of a church, group. Okay. And I wonder, is it your experience to date that is people with faith who are more than likely to respond to your call, or is it those from the secular society, secular organizations that are more likely to respond to this, common sense call? What's your experience?
It's been actually all people. The response has been profoundly from people of faith and people without faith. So I have not noted that, I think that people who are passionate about social justice, and people who might not have been brave enough to speak out. The thing about the website is that you leave your story, it's anonymous, because I wanted to protect people while they did the work. However, if anybody wants to come and speak on the podcast, please get in touch. The response has been across society, and that's very encouraging, because although my last podcast guest is Mother Ellen Eames from St. Christopher's Church in Pembroke House in Southwark. Yes. And she, I wanted to get her perspective as a vicar and to talk about these things in the church, because it's almost more difficult for me as a woman of faith to see these things, discrimination and injustices happening in faith communities. It's when the message of God's messages of love and everybody being special and unique, and yet we still have these things going on. So I think that there's a great opportunity for the church to, if they wanted to, use the approach of white allies to interact and get people within faith communities to reflect and perhaps become better allies. But I think that is the same for other people. The one thing about being part of a church community is that you kind of have this regular communion, this regular community, the regular gatherings. So that is a great opportunity. But for people who don't have such gatherings, they can still have one-to-one conversations. They can still address those issues at work during meetings. So no one is off the hook. Everybody can do something.
So just to be clear then, are you saying that you're receiving good responses from faith community leaders, or is it those in the congregation, would you say?
I have to say more ordinary people than faith leaders. I think it's so much harder for faith leaders to step into this space. I haven't, obviously Mother Ellen did, but I think because of the structures of the church, and people are a lot more shy. But to be fair, I haven't spoken to that many faith leaders, but the few that I've spoken to, they completely agree. And I hope that they're doing some work around it in their positions of leadership.
Interesting, and thank you for that response, because of course it starts with leadership, of course. I cited the monarch as a starting point, and the monarch doesn't discuss the subject, well with the others, and the same applies to church or indeed any religious community. It really does start with the leaders. Set down a marker that this behavior runs contrary to our expectation. So consequently, if the leaders are shy, why would the congregation be otherwise? I've always pointed out that leaders must lead. Yep, okay. And it's interesting. Yes, it's interesting you mentioned Pembroke House. This happens to be an organisation quite close to me, within my political ward, as it happens. So it's most curious. I didn't know this until this moment that you were aware of Pembroke House, and they do outstanding work in the community. Sorry about the noise. I'm sure it will stop shortly. Anyway, so just if I may just take this further, because it's quite evident that as we discuss the subject, it's have you set for yourself goals in any one year? Because you've said that you're not sure to what extent you've had the impact, but I'm assuming that the initial impact will be within your place of work. Okay. Yeah. And maybe you might just tell us what impact you've had in your place of work.
Yeah, I mean, Citizens UK, as you know, is a community organizing charity, and they have been very supportive. But the way that the organization works is that they listen to communities, because the organization is made up of member institutions. And so because this is something that's not necessarily, although it affects communities in those institutions, it is something that's come from me. So they are holding me in that space and being supportive. And we've had conversations about how perhaps Citizens UK can support institutions to adopt the White Allies approach. But because it's not part of my paid role, if you like, it is still slow, and I think I need to get some capacity to progress the things that I want to do, which brings me to your other point about the plan that I might have. It's very easy to have an idea and run with it, but I really want to test what impact and how the White Allies approach is different from other approaches so far to tackle racism or to encourage people to be more anti-racist. So I want, as much as possible, to put White Allies out there and get feedback, especially from white people, about how useful, how not useful, what was the journey, how is the challenge, how has it helped, how has it not helped, so that when I hopefully develop further and get some funding, that I will be able to demonstrate that this approach can have impact. Because the impact, for example, that you're talking about, I haven't measured it. I don't really know. And somebody will say, well, it's a good idea, but is it going to work? So those are the two key things. I want to get word out on the White Allies work and to get feedback so that we can measure the impact that that approach might have.
Absolutely. And I haven't got to it, but I'll do this, put this question to you now. So I see that you have a fundraising drive. I see that you have a page on the Just Giving website. Yeah. Okay. And under White Allies, and you're inviting members of all communities to make donations so you can build capacity for this incredibly important piece of work. Okay. And let me commend this to the listeners, and let's encourage I want to encourage you to make your donations. Okay, I'm sure you don't mind what forgive me, what size the donation might be, but as much as you can afford, let's reparation begins with self. Therefore, we have to contribute for ourselves, and we must therefore give generously. Where you have sincere members of the community seeking to address these fundamental issues. We don't require the government to give us funding at all times. We could fund ourselves, and there's more than enough of us who are concerned citizens. We can all make a small contribution. So go to the justgiving.com website and look for White Allies. And of course, it's under, I believe, the funding for Citizens UK. Is that right, Josephine?
Because that is the, I want people to be reassured that this is not going into my, it's not going to pay for my shopping. So Citizens UK is holding me in that way. And if I were able to, even if I were able to get enough money to employ one person for 1 day a week, they will sit under Citizens UK, so that they are working within that structure, and it's not just kind of random. Because on my own, I possibly couldn't do all of it.
I completely understand, because you are the inspiration. We have a similar personality here at galaxyfewe.net, this radio station. His name, as was being decreed to him, he's now a Sierra Leone chief for Cumberby. He had an English name first from Jamaica, but his work on the motherland, particularly in Sierra Leone, been recognised. He's become a chief, and I have the highest respect for him. You and him speak in similar terms, I have to say, and you are, again, I'm surrounded by inspired Africans, inspired people, and I but therefore must meet your achievements. I can only hope in my other public life. So I wish to commend to the audience the justgiving.com website, and I commend and encourage you to give generously. Okay, and I'm quite sure that those who give, you, Josephine, will provide them with regular updates on progress you've made. Well, I think we may have our first caller. Let's take this call. Good morning, caller. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Been listening to the show this morning.
Can I ask you, before you begin, can I ask you just to say your name and which part of the country or overseas you're calling from?
My name is Patrick, and I'm calling from London.
Wonderful. Thank you, Patrick, for your call this morning. Do you have a question for Josephine?
Yes, I do. Good morning, Josephine, and good morning, Mr. Motivator.
Thank you. Good morning to you, Patrick.
Morning, Patrick.
I was listening to the programme, and I thought, wow, I've got thousands of questions I'm going to ask.
Maybe one or two, Patrick. Maybe one or two.
Well, yeah, but as you're going through, you're answering all the questions that I wanted to ask.
Okay.
So, as I'm sitting there, it just dawned on me. I mean, I know a lot of people for a while. I was actually born in this country many, many, many years ago, and I've got a lot of white friends. I know a lot of associates of mine who are white through work, etc. And the question I want to ask you is, how do you get these guys on board? I'm thinking about that. How do I approach them and say, hi guys, look, I'd like you to do X, Y, and Z. How would that approach actually go? And that is my question.
Okay, all that question there, an interesting one. How do you engage white people to become a white ally? What is the steps? Josephine, what would you advise?
Patrick, I think it is first of all, it takes courage. And I would say, just ask them if they have witnessed, can they share a story with you? This is the approach that we want to take, is to ask people, well, do you have a story that you might share with me? Because you might have shared stories about your experiences, but then you turn it over to them, and most people want to be listened to. Now, I have encountered a few people, not so many, who have said to me, I have never encountered racism. I have never benefited from my privilege. Now that is but that can also be a topic for conversation. I mean, if somebody said that to me, I would say, you know, haven't you heard, you know, in the news, anything? People are not ready to go there. So that is your indication that people are not ready. And so you mustn't put it down their throats if they're not ready. But I think most people will go, oh, let me think. And the people that I've spoken to, especially my friends, have described what a challenge that question was. People have asked me for more time. They've said, oh, let me have a think, Josephine. I need to think. I probably need to go and really, that's why on the website we say set aside that time, because it is almost like wading through a thick forest to go down there and be completely honest with yourself, because most people will either be in denial about it or they choose to ignore it. So they're therefore having to face the fact that they have ignored it or they have decided that it wasn't their problem. And you are asking them to go there. So some people will be receptive to it. A lot of people are humbled by it. And I haven't had any animosity or people going, how dare you? People have said, well, how do you ask a fish how they swim in water? Like, this is my life. I've never had to think about it. I've never had to think about what Black people's experience or brown people's experiences would be. So it is a courageous question, but I'm telling you, it's very rewarding if you can ask it.
Brilliant. Patrick?
Yes, yes.
Any response to that? Would you've heard?
Yeah.
Okay, let me help you then.
Yeah.
So you're right to engage particularly our white friends, to discuss openly their privileged position, because the way the system is set up, okay, is challenging. It is challenging because they may not recognize they have privileges, you know, or indeed the impact those privileges therefore might have on others, you know. So I completely understand. But the first stage is, first of all, do they recognize that racism exists? I think, Josephine, is what you're saying. If they recognize racism exists, the next stage, of course, is, well, can we work together to minimize its impact, negative impact on non-white, Black or brown people? Do you have another question?
Well, no, I think you've really answered it. But if I go back to the old cliche, and the answer goes up, and I don't know if you actually remember this yourself, because I think we may be a similar age. But there's the old cliche, which was you have a chip on your shoulder once you mentioned anything of that nature, and that was involved. That was what was said to people once you sort of went down that road. Of course, we are in 2022 and things have certainly changed. But for me, obviously, I'm growing up with that, and it probably makes it a bit more difficult for me because of that. That sort of way of thinking, which has been sort of drummed into you as you're growing up. You can't say nothing. You if you do say something, then there's something wrong with you. It's not actually society. And sort of getting on to that. I also think that it's a great idea, but also the places like the media and as really said, like the royal family, these sort of people, or these sort of setups should be the ones as well, sort of leading this way, because we all know that the media has been vilifying people of non-white for years. It was always a negative press. Surely they're the sort of people we should be aiming for, these people who work for these types of organisations. And some of our government, especially some of these conservatives, some of these policies they put out, which directly impact us.
Yes.
You know, so
Yes.
so yeah, I'm all for it, and every little bit helps.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that input, because you've identified an interesting part of the propaganda that we've all been exposed to. If we discuss race, if we discuss racism, if we discuss racial disadvantage, then there's something wrong with you. You're the one suffering. And yes, Josephine, the term used, I don't hear it so often these days, but it's inferred by other terminology. But anyway, you have a chip on your shoulders. That's why you keep talking about this. You know, the police wouldn't stop you if you didn't believe you were a criminal. You know.
Yeah. Can I say something there?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If you swap, and I use this sometimes in conversations with people, and I say, think about domestic violence.
Yes.
And think about women saying, this has got to stop.
Yes.
Now, it is absolutely fine for women to say that, but it's the men that need to change their behavior. And we need to change our approach, and we can, because during the pandemic, did we say to people at most risk of dying from COVID what did we do? The government came out and said, we have got to protect people who are at most risk. They have to be protected. Please make sure that you go and bring them shopping so that they're not exposed. When the vaccines came through, what did we do? We said, people who are at most risk must receive this. So if that can happen within a month, when COVID hit, the response was immediate. So we can do it. We can do it, but it doesn't affect everybody. And therefore, if somebody who is got underlying health condition said, I'm the most at risk, please protect me, would you say, oh, you've got a chip on your shoulder?
Oh, yeah, you're quite right. You're quite right. Different context, exactly the same theme. Thank you, Josephine. That was very insightful, very insightful. And Patrick, thank you for that call. You asked a quite an interesting series of questions, and I'm pleased that the interview was answering your questions, which is why I suspect I've just sent a message to a number of people. They are all listening, and what tends to happen, Josephine, they wait until 5 to 10, but I'm supposed to end the interview right now. That's what tends to happen, but I believe your questions, answer to my questions, have answered many people's underlying questions that were thinking how to do this. And I suppose, first of all, Patrick, thank you for those questions, and continue listening, and thank you for your support, okay?
Yes, thank you guys.
Pleasure. And Josephine, I'm just conscious of time, as I said, it runs on very quickly. Next steps, outcomes. I'm always concerned with outcomes of these programs. Okay, what would be a suitable outcome for this program for you? What would be a suitable outcome?
Well,
the verb, you see. Yes.
I hope, as I said, that what I'm working on now is getting this message out. So I'm hoping that your listeners will spread the word about this work, and that we will get some more stories on the website. I also would be grateful for people's support, financial support, if that was possible. And for people to get in touch if people are interested. I mean, I'm always looking for volunteers. I'm not, despite the inspiration, I have to rely on volunteers to help me with like editing the podcast and doing this, because I've got almost a full-time job. And if people are interested, to please contact me via the website or go on social media. We've got Twitter, we've got Instagram, and it is at White Allies UK. So there's a UK at the end of it. There's lots of other initiatives like White Allies, but ours is White Allies UK. So on Instagram and Twitter, and yeah, please spread the word. please get in touch if you're interested. And, you know, if you would like to remain in contact, then please do let us know. And we will, as we move forward, as the work develops, we will be able to get in touch with you and let you know and get you involved.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And just also to reiterate, in addition to the Twitter and Instagram, the website again, it's whiteallies.org. Okay. So, and of course, there are various White Allies websites, but the whiteallies.org refers to your website. Okay,
Yes.
so clear. Okay. And I really wish to encourage people to make contact with you via the website, or indeed those white people who wish to share their experiences in becoming an ally for justice, for the good of the country. Please share your podcast, okay? And I really hope that we stimulate the movement, continue to stimulate the movement. It is multifaceted. This is just one strand, one string to our bow. And if we all work together, we can achieve the final outcome, which is truly a united kingdom, truly united kingdom of Britain. That's Josephine, thank you. You've been an outstanding guest. Thank you so much. I will say again, on behalf of the community, please continue your good works. And if you've got an event or an issue you wish to raise, feel free to call this program at any time. Contact me, call at any time. I will always create space for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much for this opportunity. And I just wanted to end with a reflection question for people. If we ask Black people, what would the world be like without racism?
Wow, that's a vision. Yeah, wow.
We have to reimagine everything. But that world is possible. And I think that we need to think about that, and for our white allies to think about what a wonderful world it would be without racism. So yeah, thank you so much, Martin, for inviting me on this program.
It's a pleasure, great pleasure. I always reiterate, we are but one human species.
Yes.
You could meet a man from China and you could have a child for that man. Yeah, because we're still one family. Yeah, we're still one family. Yeah. And that's a really profound observation. People find it difficult to accept at times. I said it when I say we're one family, even though that person from China or woman, in my case, from say India, our families not met for thousands of years. We still remain a single family, and that's why we can have children for each other, because we are but one species, we are one family. Praise be. Long may you continue your good work. We'll get you back again in the not too distant future. But thank you, Josephine.
That would be amazing.
Thank you for your inspiration. Thank you for your inspiration. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
What a wonderful, inspired person she is, isn't she, listeners? And long may we continue to have such inspired women in our community. And I want to continue this theme of focusing on the contribution women make to our general experiences. And it's quite clear, it's very clear that we as men do not give sufficient promotion highlighting to the contribution that women have made and continue to make to our community's evolution, both spiritual, economic evolution. And Josephine, an example of an ordinary person, an ordinary woman engaged in extraordinary activities. Is it so extraordinary? Is it just simply common sense? Those who carry out racist, ethnically biased, suffer from Afrophobia or undermining Britain. They're undermining Britain as a coherent country. They're undermining Britain's economic potential. They're undermining Britain's future. Working together for a better Britain so we all benefit, we'll have exponential wealth creation opportunities and outcomes that we all will benefit from. Okay, you just can't do it on your own. Wow, that was quite a program. I feel so inspired now. I've got to go off to my other political activities immediately after the show, but I will do it with the knowledge that I've spoken to another inspired human being. She's not just simply a woman. She's not simply a person of African heritage. She's not simply a Black person. To another inspired human being. You know? As I said, being a man, just listen to the women, okay? And you can't go too far wrong. It's now 10 o'clock. I wish you all well. And I hope this program and my future programs and my past programs offer insights as to how we can create together a better society. I wish you all well. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Take care. Bye-bye. And now I'll hand over to the next pilot, who I believe is Sister Sajanra. Hopefully she will continue to inspire you all on galaxyafui.net. Thank you. The motivator